Okay, so now tell me, when was Luger's Furniture started and by whom?
Leugers Furniture was started about 1903 by George Herman Leugers. He was in partnership with somebody else, but he ended up buying them out. And it was in Elmwood Place. There was a bank on the corner, and they owned the building next to the bank. Well, they eventually bought the bank. The bank moved across the street, and they bought the bank, and they also expanded out the back, bought the apartment building next door, and they just kept expanding on corner of Vine and Linden Street
Okay.
in Elmwood
So
Place.
Elmwood Place was the first Luger's Furniture.
Yes.
Okay.
Later on, they bought a place in over the Rhine on the corner of Elm and Elder Street.
That's the one that's down by Finley Market.
Yes. And they also bought a place in Reading. I'm not sure about the dates of when they were bought, but in the early 50s or the mid 50s, they sold both of those places.
Okay.
And they bought a store in Kenwood around 1960. And they bought a place over on Western Hills at Glenmore and Glenway. I'm thinking in the late 50s or something like that. I don't really remember. And so there were three stores.
What was the one that you would always take me to when I was a kiddo and you had to check on it because it was closed? And I always remember it being dark, and you were like, yeah, it was dark because it was closed.
Okay. Luger's Furniture did business with Ethan Allen. Ethan Allen wanted their own store. So Luger's Furniture opened a store at 35 Tri-County Parkway in Tri-County, and it was an Ethan Allen store. Luger's Furniture would close on Wednesdays and Sundays.
Mm.
And anyway, so I would go in on a Wednesday and it was closed. So we would only turn the lights on in the office, which were in the back of the store.
Oh.
That's why it was dark. Then later on, they built another Ethan Allen store that was on Pyramid Drive at the corner of I-71 and Fields Erdel Road. Later on, they renamed that street Governor's Hill or Governor's something. So there were two Ethan Allen stores.
But they had the Luger's name front?
Yes.
Okay. And then what was the story you told me about your dad and the stickers? He was playing with the stickers.
Oh. They were tax stamps. Mm. My grandmother family owned a grocery store down on 2nd Street. It's all that area is gone. It's all torn down years ago, but they had a little grocery store, and it was tenements down there, and they sold groceries. They also sold liquor. They would buy liquor by the barrel, and then you would bottle it yourself. And when you bottled it, you had a tax sticker, and you put the top on it and then put the tax sticker over the top of the bottle to show that the proper taxes had been paid for it. Mm. Well, right before Prohibition, they bought an enormous quantity of whiskey. My dad told me they spent $50,000, which in the in the 20s, that would have been enormous. Well, when they sold the liquor, there was no point in putting a tax stamp on it. Mm. And so my dad would play around with these huge rolls of tax stamps in the basement of the grocery store. When the liquor ran out, they closed the grocery store.
So at that point, were they selling it illegal, or it was still legal to sell what you had?
I have no idea.
No. This
But
is
a lot of times they sold it by the drink.
mm,
Somebody come in for groceries and they get a big mug of alcohol with it. So I don't know if it was legal or not. They purchased everything legally and they paid all the taxes.
mm.
So I don't know anything more than that.
You don't know, or you won't admit.
I think the statute of limitations have run out.
What was your favorite thing about Luger's furniture growing up?
Um, it was fun to run through those stores.
I love that.
Especially Elmwood was multiple floors, and you'd have to got to run the elevator by yourself, and it was this old-fashioned elevator where you had to close the door, and then there was another door that wasn't, I don't know what you call that. It was crisscrossed metal, and you do that and press the button and go all the way up to the top floor or go all the way down. And it was fun to go through there and play hide and seek.
Mm.
And you'd stay away from somebody who was talking to a customer. You'd stay far enough away. And they used to have a big candy dish of sour balls on the front counter. So you could always get a few sour balls to eat. So that was fun.
That's funny because one of my favorite memories is running around the store as well and getting lost and playing hide and seek and being really lost and then being like, oh, now I know where I am. And I think like growing up, I always liked like no matter where I went, whoever the sales folks were, they would recognize me as a Lugers and know that
Yeah.
I was one of the 5 kiddos.
Yeah. Yeah, they would.
Was in the building.
And then sliding down that big staircase.
That was at Kenwood.
Yeah, Kenwood. Yeah, I really like that. That was fun. And then when you guys had the like an open, it was like a late night open house or something.
Side door sale.
Yeah, and then you'd have like the stereo, the surround sound.
Oh yeah, we had a big surround sound and keep that going during the sale, and
There'd be
the
snacks.
place was so busy.
Mm.
It was just a carnival atmosphere in there. That was always fun.
Yeah, it was really fun. What was the story you told me about I think it was Grandpa George going over to Germany and like things got weird. Yeah.
Oh, that was George Herman Lugers,
Your great grandfather?
my great grandfather.
Great grandfather. Okay.
He quit. His last trip over was 1938, and he told, I never met him, but he told my dad how that was it. Nobody would talk to him. Everybody was afraid that, there were spies everywhere. If you said anything, you would be in trouble. I got a feeling that during World War I and World War II, they were a little apprehensive because my great grandfather used to go back and forth to Germany. As I said, the last trip was 38. And they were, maybe that's why my dad got sent to the Pacific. I don't know. But it was certainly an item in World War I. I don't know if World War II, but you wouldn't know very much about it anyway.
So in 1938, how was he traveling? By boat to get there?
I'm sure it was.
That's
By
crazy.
ship, passenger liner.
And so he was going to just see family. So at that point, he's first generation.
Yeah, he came over to the United States in his 20s.
Oh, okay. So he's going back and forth to see family.
Yes.
And he could afford to go back and forth.
Yeah. He did very well. When he died, he was the president of the First National Bank of Elmwood Place.
Oh yeah, tell me about that. You've told me that before.
I don't know much about it except that it's on his obituary that he was the president of the First National Bank of Elmwood Place. My dad told me that he owned a lumber yard up in Carthage, which is just north up Vine Street from Elmwood, and that he may have owned other businesses. He lived on the corner of 72nd and Fair Park in Carthage, which was maybe a mile from Elmwood.
So he's the one that started the Leugers Furniture.
Yes.
So when did he start it? Roughly at that point, how old was he then?
He would have been in his late 20s.
Oh, so he came from Germany and
he came, yeah. Well, he went to work for somebody and then and buying them out.
Gotcha. Okay. Would he have learned like how to build furniture in Germany? Like woodworking's big in Germany.
Most likely he was a cabinet maker.
Okay. Because it started out as cabinets.
Yeah, in a furniture business, it was different back then. You know, you'd buy chairs from dining room chairs from one place, a table from another place. You'd buy this from somebody else, and and they made some at the same time, you know, but you didn't want to make chairs because a chair is very hard to make.
Oh, because if it's not level or something,
it's not square.
Oh.
If you look at a chair, there's nothing square on a chair. They're curved legs. If you have a chair that's all straight and square, it'll fall over easily and it's uncomfortable. So your back is at an angle, your front to back is different. Everything in there is different. So they're very difficult to make. You have to have, it's best to have jigs where you make each part in a jig and put it together. So you need more production than a simple cabinet maker could get. You know, otherwise you spend an inordinate amount of labor on it. Excuse me.
Okay, cool. All right, that's going to wrap up our first episode. All right.
Don't you want me to tell you about how I had my thumb on a nuclear missile?
Well, yeah, okay. I didn't pause
Just
it.
like that. Oh, I'm sorry.
Now tell us. The people want to know.
The Nike Hercules.
Oh, yeah.
Had nuclear warheads on them. And my job in the Army would be to fire that missile at enemy aircraft. And we didn't have, all we had were nuclear tipped anti-aircraft missiles. And so had the button and you push it.
Oh, geez.
And we had to practice that.
Oh, man.
So there's a little white light just above it. Well, if the white light is on, it meant that the circuit had the simulator attached to it. If that white light was not on and you got it ready to fire and you press that, you were going to launch a missile. So you had to be very careful to make sure you had the simulate light and fire it. So what they would do is take the bulb out of the simulate light. They'd unscrew it and pull the bulb out. And then you're doing the exercise. Was the simulate light on?
Oh, no. Tell me about going up to on Malibu with the brakes down.
The missile site was 3,200 and some odd feet above sea level. To get to work, I drove Pacific Coast Highway. It was at sea level. And my Mustang had an automatic transmission, and you come down this very steep road every day when you get to the bottom of it, your brakes would just smoke. And I didn't get more than 8,000 miles out of a set of brakes
Oh, jeez.
because that just would tear up the car. Trying to go down that mountain. Going up wasn't too bad. The Mustang had a V8, and it went up fine, but coming down, it was smoking.
Oh, I remember the story I really want to hear. When your dad told you, don't get this car.
Oh, my dad told me not to buy a foreign car, that the American cars were so much better, and that all those British cars were junk. But I fell in love with a Sunbeam Alpine. It was the coolest little sports car. I bought it. I can't remember. And the engine blew up.
What happened with something like an alternator being out? Was that vehicle?
Starter.
Starter.
The starter broke on it.
And then somebody was on
So
strike or something?
so I go to the store to get a new one. They said, "Oh, it's in port, but there's a strike on." The longshoremen have a strike on, and nothing's getting in or out of the ports in the US. So I went for 60 days with no starter in the car. So I had to roll start it. Wherever I went, I made sure to park on a hill and just roll start the thing. It was light enough though that even on level ground, I'd find a drainage sewer or something, aim for that, and I could still do it. It was humorous.
And what'd your dad say, like once that thing blew up? Didn't he say
You,
something or do something? Or
you got to learn for yourself. I think he said something about that. I guess you have to learn for yourself.
and there was something unique about the British that they were hand cut or something.
The British weren't like the Americans. The Americans did everything mass production. And if a part was out of tolerance in the US, they threw it in the scrap heap. In Britain, they would work on it, and they'd take all the scrap parts and try and put them together, which meant if you ever had to replace anything, nothing would fit.
Mm-hmm.
So you had to be real careful of them, because they wouldn't throw it in the scrap heap. They'd rework it, and that's fine. Or I guess it'll make the car run, but if you ever have to replace that part, nothing will fit.
Mm.
So you had to be real careful with British made products. That, and they had an odd standard. We used fractional inches, like a 3/8 inch wrench, 7/16, half inch, 3/8. No, the British had a different standard.
Mm.
It was Wentworth. And I don't know what, I think it was a percent of this or something of the diameter of the bolt. And so some of their bolts were just, you had to have a Wentworth wrench to work on them.
Mm.
They weren't metric, they weren't American or
Mm.
Society of Automotive Engineers, SAE. They were odd. So British things were odd.
Mm. What was the you said that your dad, he was supposed to be the second wave.
Oh, my dad somehow ended up, he went in the army. Okay. The war starts December 7th, 1942. My dad was working for Wright Aeronautical. It was a exempt job, but he was already in the reserves. He was a reserve officer graduating from Xavier in 1939 with a commission. He was called to active duty in early 1942 as soon as they could figure out who was where. And he went into the field artillery because that's what all Xavier graduates went into. Mm-hmm. He somehow didn't get deployed early on. He was kept as cadre to train this enormous army that was coming about. Well, a bunch of his classmates got sent over to North Africa. Well, my dad was teaching field artillery while this is going on. And eventually he got sent to Hawaii for the big push against Japan. He was going to be in direct support of a Marine brigade. And the Marine brigade was on the second wave. They estimated casualties were going to be 50%. This is invading the home island. You can look it up, but the Japanese correctly guessed what the American strategy was going to be, that we would invade the southmost island first, then build up our forces there and use that as a jumping off place to hit the next island, the one that Tokyo is on. Well, they secretly sneaked over 1 million extra soldiers into the first place, and they were going to change tactics. In the past, they've used kamikazes against the warships. They were going to go after the troop ships. Mm. So, and they were going to have massive suicide waves after these soldiers. And so they had no idea what the casualties just were astronomical. They varied so wildly, but they expected horrendous casualties. And so the second wave was going to be 50%. What's that mean for the first wave? Yeah. So anyway.
So, and I think you had said, because when I went over to Kumamoto, the area he was supposed to go into was like right nearby, I thought. Does that sound right?
I don't know where it is. The war plans are online. Mm.
And then they ended up dropping the bomb, so they didn't do that. Correct?
Yeah. Yes.
But he had already sent his stuff forward.
They were loading the ships to go. The invasion was November 1945. The war ended August 1945. So they were starting to load the ships with all their supplies so that they would be able to go over. So you load your supplies up and then your troops go in troop ships. Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. All right. So we'll wrap it up now. Any words before we finish?
That's it.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. And